Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special board meeting for the MSAD 49 Board of School Directors. The phone line is open, so if anyone wants to go ahead and call in, you can get in the queue at this point, but we'll start with roll call. Booton?
Here.
Boyden? Here. Caverly? Absent. Davis Folsom?
Here.
Dumont?
Here.
Kashi?
Here.
Hussey?
Here.
Kinley?
Here. My computer decided to update.
Okay, Stu is here. His computer is finishing an update. Kugelmeyer?
Here.
Lambert? Lambert is going to be late this evening. White?
Here.
And Williams. I just let Sarah in the meeting, so Sarah, can you say if you're here?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point we have 10 members present. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. So John said we do have some people on the phone. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute, and you are live. If you have a comment for public comment, this is the citizen input section of tonight's meeting. And once you come on the line, could you please state your name and the town you're calling from?
Are we just supposed to chime in?
Hi.
Or are you calling on us?
Well, I think only one of you will be live at a time. So if you could go ahead and just state your name and the town you're calling from.
Okay. I don't think we know who's live. I'm guessing it's me.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. My name's Caitlin Paulette, and I'm from Fairfield. I am just calling in tonight. I sent you guys, the entire board and Roberta, an email this week. And I'm just continuing to feel very concerned about the direction our school's going this year. Particularly, I wanted to encourage the board, I'll kind of plead with you guys, I guess, to really discuss scheduling. And I've been hearing this idea of every other day, and that's what we're going towards for attendance in the district. And I'm just really concerned, personally, that is an extreme hardship for my family. I'm looking at actually not being able to go back to my own teaching job, if that's the case, for lack of childcare for my third grader. On top of that, I'm really concerned, if I'm in this condition, I'm sure other parents are called around. I'm on an extremely long wait list at one place out of the 8 places I've called so far. And the other concern for me is, every other day teaching, at what point is there going to be time for the teachers to cope with the amount of stress this is going to put them under, the amount of professional development that they're going to need to continue to roll with this as it evolves. So I really want to hear some conversation, or hope to hear some conversation tonight in the board meeting about why, if this is the plan we're going with, and again, this is a rumor, I haven't seen or heard an official plan, but if that's what you're talking about for attendance, why? And, you know, I know a lot of the other schools in this area are doing that, but then to MMTC, I attended the technical center. I think it's a wonderful program, but that is a small portion of our population that's attending it. And it is not the at-risk population that is attending it. Our young children are elementary years. So I just really want to hear and have a more understanding tonight, and really a decision, because we as parents and in this community need to come together to figure out how we're going to get our kids to your doors if we choose to send them. And I think that that's going to be a real hardship. I have a very hard time filling out the survey because I don't know, what you guys are offering, basically. So I hope that that's decided tonight with, a firm plan for at least the attendance piece so that we can move forward as a community. And it really should, in my mind, be something that's a unity for the district. I know that there are buildings that can support 100% enrollment, but I think that creates a divide among the districts. And I'd like to see something that brings us together to support one another. So I guess that's my piece, and I appreciate your time and all your courage for doing what you're doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Caitlin. Just one moment, and I think we have another person.
Hello?
Is there someone live on the phone line?
Hello?
Is there someone live on the phone line? Well, could you turn
I'm
down,
not sure if I'm...
You are. Could you turn down the audio streaming? Because I can hear myself coming back. And then if you could just go ahead and say your name and where you're from.
I'm
Hello?
not sure if this is my turn, but
Yes.
hello?
Yes.
Okay. This is Elaine Richard. I'm in Fairfield. I too had sent some emails to the board, but I wanted to ask some questions tonight, and I do appreciate you taking our calls and the time that you've put into this. I understand that one of the reasons some of the kids, one of the schools, especially Benton, is not able to have all kids in school at all times because of the population. And I'm wondering if there's been any consideration for using portable classrooms so that the grades that need to be in larger spaces can take up either larger spaces actually in the school or portable classrooms. My other question is about kids who choose to stay at home, or when kids are on the days that they will be learning at home, what will be done so that children can participate with their class and their teachers in real time? And along that same line, I'm wondering what kind of extra training and support staff will have so that children can learn in real time online. I'm going to mute myself, and thank you for answering these questions and taking the time to make this all work. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.
Kim Lane from Benton.
Hi, Kim. You can go ahead.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. Okay, I have a couple of questions. Again, I'm going to echo what was just said. We appreciate the time that people are putting into this plan.
Richard
But I
has
have
left the
some
conference.
I think
I have
you're all
some
set now.
concerns. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Like I said, I echo the fact that we appreciate all that people are doing for our district, but I do have some concerns. First of all, with childcare, that is a big concern for myself, and I know a lot of people that I've spoken to, especially with both of my children going to Benton. That is that going to be available? Because currently I work at home. I'm home working,
but my company could send me back at any time. So I really would like to know what the status is with that, especially if we're looking at starting school on September 8th and it's now the 13th of August. People need to have a chance to plan. Parents need to have a chance to plan what they're going to do with their children. And also, is there going to be childcare available for the days that the kids aren't in school? So that's one of the concerns that I have. And the other one is the busing, as far as getting the kids to school. That is a major concern, and I haven't really heard a whole lot about that. So I'm hoping that's going to be addressed tonight as well. And that's what I have. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else?
Kim
In the-
Lane has left the conference.
Do we have anyone else in the queue, John? Okay. All right. So we don't have anyone else heading in the queue. So we will go ahead and I also want to echo actually the thanks that those 3 callers just expressed. There is a tremendous amount of work that is going into the plan for reopening the school buildings. And I know that the board appreciates it, and I'll just speak for myself. I very much appreciate the work that is happening with the administration, the employee associations that are involved, the nursing staff, the custodial staff. We have a reintegration group that really covers all of the areas that it needs to. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows that we appreciate the work that they're doing to meet this goal, and acknowledge that it's very difficult to do when guidelines change regularly and you don't always know that they've changed until potentially after. Some guidelines have changed as recently as yesterday. So it will be important that we acknowledge as we go through this and we talk about it, that we have to be able to adapt as those guidelines change. So at this point, we have nothing on the agenda for old business, so I think we can jump right to new business. Mr. Sursum for the reopening plan.
Thanks, Jenny. I apologize. And thank you.
Hey, Roberta, it's
Yes.
a little like I can't hear you that well, and I'm suspecting other people can't either. The same thing with Jenny, so I don't know what the.
All right. Can we just hold on that? John Holt's gonna.
So I suspect the audience can't hear you. If we can't hear you, I don't think the people can hear you.
Is this better?
It's a little muffled. I'm not muffled, clearly. Shouts to the entire district can hear me. If you want, I'll just shout from my home and everybody can hear me.
All right. Well, we shut off some fans here. I will do my best. I'll speak up. And I'd just like to begin by thanking all our personnel who have been working so hard these past months to prepare our buildings. And, you know, it has been our hope all the while that we are able to welcome everyone back and we would resume as normal. And we know that's not going to be the case, unfortunately. So thus we are proposing a plan, and I have spoken to some of the essential components of it in previous communications. But anyway, in consideration of the health and safety of students and staff, these points are all central to this plan. We also understand that this COVID-19 pandemic has caused disruption to the lives of our students and their families, our staff, and broader community. And there are many interrelated factors that must be elements of this plan, most of which are fixed points set forth by the Maine DOE and the Maine CDC. Please know that our goal is a full return. There's just nothing.
We're going to try a different headset for Roberta and see if a different microphone helps.
I just spoken.
Yeah, because Jenny, you were really clear just now.
Yeah, so give her a second to change headsets and microphones.
God.
We've turned off all of the fans, so there shouldn't be any other ambient noise. We'll just change microphones.
Is this better? Better?
Yes.
All right. And you know, I'm just going to start from the top. If no one heard me, I'm sorry. I do apologize. So in consideration of the health and safety of students and staff that are central to this plan, we also understand that the COVID-19 pandemic has caused disruption to the lives of our students and their families, our staff, and broader community. And there are many interrelated factors that must all be elements of this plan, most of which are fixed points set forth by the Maine DOE and the Maine CDC. Please know that our goal is a full return to in-person learning, and short of that, returning as many students as possible as frequently as we can. Schools serve a broader purpose beyond educational programming. Schools serve to care for children in many other ways that for some students are vitally important, and the absence of these supports has created stress. Our planning, discussions, recommendations, and decisions going forward are all driven by what is safest for all people who will be in our buildings, what is possible, and what is sustainable this school year. On July 31st, the Maine Department of Education released the health risk levels by county and is set to do so again tomorrow, August 14th, with the designations red, high risk of COVID spread, yellow, elevated risk of COVID spread, and green, relatively low risk of COVID-19 spread. While the designation of green in all 16 counties reflects a positive status for our state, the Maine Department of Education also requires schools to meet very specific criteria before in-person learning can occur. Though Kennebec County and Somerset County are designated green, the Maine DOE further states that schools in green counties may need to use a hybrid instructional model if there is an insufficient capacity or other factors, facilities, staffing, geography, transportation, etc., that may prevent full implementation of the health and safety requirements as identified in the Maine DOE's framework for returning to classroom instruction's 6 requirements for protecting health and safety. We continue to assess school readiness to implement current Maine CDC's guidance for schools. These are also requirements for schools in Maine to return to in-person instruction. We know face masks will be required by all people, including staff and students. Additionally, we must ensure that we prepare our classrooms to meet physical distancing requirements. Students must be 3 feet apart, and adults must have 6 feet of distance between themselves and any other person. We've been removing all non-essential furniture and materials to maximize our classroom spaces and avoided plexiglass barriers and individual desks to help us meet the needs that these distancing requirements present us. The physical distancing requirements also extend to our use of school buses. Though our capacity to transport students to school and to access in-person learning is reduced, we're working hard to bring as many children back into our school buildings as possible while meeting and maintaining these safety guidelines. Our district is planning for 3 scenarios: a full return to in-person learning, continued remote learning, or a hybrid model that will provide students with some access to in-person. Information about the capacity of each school building and the capacity of the district to transport students to our schools and options for return to classroom instruction has been gathered, reviewed, assessed, and presented to this school board at the last meeting by individual building principals and our Director of Operations and Transportation, Scott Washburn. So the 3 scenarios are, and it would be a code of green, full return to in-person learning, in which students are welcome to return to school for in-person learning, all students. Families may opt to select 100% remote learning for their child or children. And that's important to understand. In these first two scenarios, parents always will have that option to elect to keep their children at home and have access to our programming through a virtual experience. All students will be assigned a laptop for remote learning in the event that the district must shift to hybrid or full remote models. And in this way, MSAD 49 was very fortunate when this shutdown occurred, in that we had in place one-to-one computing, with the exception of the very younger grades, K1, I believe, where there were carts in the classrooms with devices. The hybrid model, oh, excuse me, before I proceed with that. So attendance and participation will be required in the full in-person. Of course, grading system will be utilized. Grades will be reported in Infinite Campus. And if a parent wants to change their option of remote pathway, that parent should contact the building principal, and we will work with you. In the hybrid model, or blue and gray days, the alternating day model, students will attend in-person classes on their designated blue or gray day. Blue and gray in-person days will alternate. A blue student will participate in learning remotely on a gray day. Remote learners will participate through Google Meets throughout the school day, synchronously when possible with their classmates. All students will be assigned a laptop for remote learning. Blue and gray days will be noted on the hybrid school calendar. Attendance and participation are required. Grading system will be utilized, and grades will be reported in Infinite Campus. Families may opt to select 100% remote learning for their children. If a parent wants to change this option in this pathway, again, they should please contact the building principal. And the third option in red is 100% remote learning, which we just experienced with the March closure of school buildings across the state. Remote learners will participate through Google Meets and other Google-based tools throughout the school day, synchronously as possible, or asynchronously. All students will be assigned a laptop for remote learning. Attendance and participation are required in this format. Grading system will be utilized, and grades will be reported in Infinite Campus. Another adjustment. So as we continue our work to develop and refine procedures for the safe reopening of schools, the district is making preparations to promote healthy behaviors, environments, and operations that reduce the spread of COVID-19, and will conduct ongoing assessment to monitor the district's capacity to operate in any of these three scenarios. In consideration of capacity and MSAD 49's ability to meet social distancing requirements, the district is currently in a position to offer a hybrid model. The first student day, as approved by the board at the last meeting, is September 8th, and that will be a blue day. It's a Tuesday. It's the day after Labor Day. Grades 7 through 12 students will begin their school day with the adjustment to 7:30 arrival and a 1:25 dismissal for walkers and a 1:30 dismissal for students riding the school buses. The elementary school day will begin with an 8:45 drop-off arrival as the buses move to the elementary buildings, and this is our closest estimate right now, as Scott Washburn is using the TransFinder software and preparing the routes and looking for ways to most efficiently utilize our fleet and get through our neighborhoods after leaving the Lawrence complex. Principals will be communicating with families about school opening, a schedule of events, and resources for families to learn more about what changes have taken place in the building and new safety procedures that are necessary to prevent the transmission of illness. And I might add, if I could direct families to the district banner page in the middle table under events, you should see some listings of some forums that building principals are going to facilitate some virtual and in person, and I think they have attempted to do a virtual and an in-person, and I will be participating with those principals as they are scheduled throughout next week. And you should be hearing this through our school messenger system or robocall. Should be coming out in a day or so. It is our goal to have every student who is able to attend school in person. A phase-in model beginning with a hybrid is the plan. Students in all grades will be grouped into 2 cohorts, attending on alternating days, blue-gray, and we have worked out this plan so it is consistently throughout the school district. We're using the same language, and it is alternating days. And after an orientation period of preparing students for the new environment, procedures, and a reacclimation to school, the district will reassess the plan and our capacity to either move to a full reopening or remain in a hybrid mode. This initial phase will remain in effect, and I'm recommending for 3 weeks until September 24th. The staff and the administration will daily and weekly assess the school environment and monitor risk levels as provided by the Maine DOE, the Maine CDC. The board will be updated September 17th, and recommendations for consideration and approval of a full return to in-person or remaining in the hybrid mode will be made. And it should be understood, of course, that the 100% remote learning may be required at any time, given the health environment of our communities or our school buildings. So in regard to just a communication piece, multiple modes of communication, and particularly when I think of what had occurred in March quite suddenly, the best way to stay abreast of current conditions and updates is the MSAD 49 website and school-based newsletters and other media postings that the individual principals are using. And of course, School Messenger, and that is the software we use that interfaces with our student information system that generates the robocalls, and through SMS. In additional ways, staff meetings, parent meetings, virtual open houses and tours, videos of school procedures. We'll have this reopening plan on the website once it's adopted, in understanding that it is a living document. It's dynamic. It's not going to be static, and it may be adjusted every day, but we're trying to share with you this evening what the model will look like in terms of days and school day hours, and the finer points of school schedules are still being worked out. So determination of scenario is based on current health and safety conditions, as I said, and within the Maine Department of Education's framework for returning to classroom instruction, determining what is safe to return to in-person instruction, 2 considerations for reopening were identified. So the county risk for spread of COVID-19 to our schools, and the school's capacity for implementing the following health and safety requirements. And these are the 6 requirements for safely opening schools in the fall. Symptoms screening at home before coming to school for all staff and students. Students, parents, and caregivers and staff members must conduct self-checks for symptoms prior to boarding buses or entering school buildings each school day. Schools should provide information to families in their primary language to support them in conducting this check, and any person showing symptoms must report their symptoms and not be present at school. Schools must provide clear and accessible directions to parents and caregivers and students for reporting symptoms and absences. And we have those pieces in place, but again, they are evolving in progress. I know our school nurses have been working on the document that was, again, updated today. And we have in our plan a model for that checklist, but it's important that for all people coming into the building that happens outside before crossing the threshold, and even on the school bus for children. Physical distancing in our facilities. Adults must maintain 6 feet of distance from others to the extent possible, and maintaining 3 feet of distance is acceptable between and among students when combined with other measures outlined in this list of safety requirements. 6 feet of physical distancing is required for students while eating breakfast and lunch, as students will be unable to wear masks at that time. And that is important. That's some of the work. It's a lot of the work. And I think the board heard that from principals and Scott and myself last weekend. We've been, walking through these buildings and measuring, and every square foot is precious real estate when we're thinking about how we can possibly, and our intent was, how can we possibly fully reopen? We must provide a medical isolation room separate from the nurse's office, and it must be designated for students and staff who exhibit COVID-19 symptoms during the school day. That's a fever of 100 or more, and there are other symptoms that you might look for, cough, shortness of breath. Adequate ventilation is required for classrooms, with schools having flexibility in implementation, such as using properly working ventilation systems or outdoor air exchange, and using fans and open windows or doors. And we are managing all of those in those ways. We've had our providers in looking at some of these symptoms, and correcting, updating, checking for efficiency and capacity. Groups in one area, room, or classroom must not exceed the governor's gathering size limits, and that's important, as the principals have been planning out, say, lunch, and trying to schedule out lunches throughout the cafeterias and measuring out those spaces. And a 6-foot table or an 8-foot table can't serve as a dining place for as many students as it used to, and that is been a lot of logistical workings to schedule in lunches, because that's one of the primary assurances that I believe we must make to the families, is that we're caring for children and we're feeding them. Mask and face coverings. Adults, including educators and staff, are required to wear a mask, face covering. Students aged 5 and above are required to wear a mask and face covering that covers their nose and mouth. That was updated July 31st. Masks are recommended for children aged 2 to 4 when developmentally appropriate. Again, updated on the 31st. Masks and face coverings worn by all students on the bus. Face shields may be an alternative for those students with documented medical or behavioral challenges who are unable to wear masks and face coverings, and that is the phrase that was updated just yesterday. The same applies to staff with medical or other health reasons for being unable to wear face coverings. Face shields worn in place of a face covering must extend below the chin and back to the ears. And just for awareness, because it's has come up, it's a frequently asked question. Staff and students are welcome to bring their own face masks in, but certainly the district is prepared and stocked to provide those to staff and students. And it may be several of them over the course of the day, as well as the face shields, as well as the other PPE, the gloves, the gowns. We know that some employees with their specific assignments, we're thinking, say someone in OTPT or some educational technicians who are in closer contact with students for not a prolonged period of time, but 3 feet, will be protected with more extensive equipment than face masks, and that is available to them. Hand hygiene. All students and staff in a school must receive training in proper hand hygiene. All students and staff must wash hands or use sanitizing gel upon entering school, before and after eating, before and after donning, removing a face mask, after using the restroom, before and after use playgrounds and shared equipment, and upon entering and exiting a school bus. And part of our plan has included ordering the sanitizing stations and installing them around the interior perimeter of the hallways of the buildings, unarmed buses. And just on that point, as we think about that and we think about the school day, which will be shorter than it has been just by virtue of transporting students to our building. And though the buses will be carrying fewer children, um, first of all, it's been a while since communities have been accustomed to seeing buses with flashing red lights stopping traffic, but they're going to be stopped there longer than they normally would. And I think that's important for everyone to understand. As a child's boarding a bus, sanitizing, loading from the back of the bus to the front, how long it takes to walk there, go to their assigned seat, and disembarking the bus is also regulated with the sanitizing that needs to happen, and maintaining those 3 feet of distancing as they leave the bus and head into the school buildings. And again, we talked about this last week, but just imagine a large population, this complex, Florence, on any given day. So there's between the schools, over 1,000 students enrolled. So we may have 500, but 500 students stepping off a school bus is a lot of people. And we're working on setting up those sanitizing stations, tables along the entrances. Students will be designated to enter at different points. And we will also have face masks there for students who are not arriving with them, because they will be required to enter the school buildings. So personal protective equipment, additional safety precautions are required for nurses and other staff supporting students in close proximity when distance is not possible. As I mentioned, when the student requires physical assistance, these precautions must be at a minimum to include eye protection, face shield or goggles, which we have ordered, mask covering. Classrooms and or areas that have been used by an individual diagnosed with COVID-19 must be closed off until thorough cleaning and sanitization takes place. And the final of the 6 points is a return to school for after illness. And 6 staff members and students must use home isolation until they meet the criteria for returning to school, which our nurses have outlined and provided resources, and that will continue to evolve. But ensuring all that these components are in place and going through what each building must provide. Some are standard and some would be very specific to the building, given the geography of the building, the location of the isolation, the medical isolation space. And that is one of the projects that our maintenance crew has been working on, is establishing those spaces and fitting them and equipping them with the resources they need. So in regard to the screening at home, as I mentioned, we do have a checklist, and that'll be placed up, and employees will need to affirm through some, probably a software, that they're coming to work and they have met that safety check requirement. And again, I know that masks and face coverings, they are uncomfortable, and I mean, that is the understatement probably, but we all are getting accustomed to wearing them when we need it. And there are protocols evolving, or school procedures that will lay out what the recourse is if a child is refusing or unable to wear the face covering. And I think each of the principals has done a good job of outlining that and trying to work with the child, but removing the child from the space where other people are potentially being exposed, and trying to work with the child, finding if there's what the cause is, if it's discomfort, and working through that. But ultimately, to be in the buildings, the face coverings need to be on. And also the finer points of that procedure will need to involve our teaching faculty and our technicians, the people that are on the front line needing to manage these situations in a way that's effective and productive. And we will be posting videos and asking the nurses to do some of this work and our principals about some healthy practices, how to put on a mask, how to take it off, safe way to handle it, how to the ritualization of hand hygiene. Principals have worked in the elementary school in scheduled times for breaks, mask breaks, and scheduled times for hand sanitizing, AM and PM. You think about needing to regulate how many students are going to the bathroom into the facilities at a time. It is all movement that was managed, but not to this degree. And it's important to understand, again, back to the requirements of the DOE and the 6 requirements to safely operate schools and open schools and keep schools open. And I guess it would be helpful to understand that that we all want school to be open and remain open, and we all want people to be safe. It is a school for over 2,000 children, school district, and over 400 employees, and that's a lot of human beings in a space. And I think everyone's goal is to make sure that people are safe and they stay healthy as we head into this.
But Roberta, to your point there, I think that's the big mind shift for people, and maybe to articulate it a different way. In the past, the goal of the district, its first goal was the education of its students. The pandemic has forced us to, in many ways, place health and safety on a level that's challenging our ability to offer educational continuity. And I think we just need to recognize that so people understand that we know that, right? Like, but given all of the challenges of the pandemic, we're not left with many options, right? It's not like we can build 5 new buildings. It's not like we can find all extra money to, add all extra staff that has never existed before. So it's a situation, I think, that is good to articulate to people that nobody is going to be happy with. We're not happy with, right? Like this is not ideal for anybody, but it's a pandemic, right? And that's the part where we just need to be like, we understand, we're frustrated. The entire world is frustrated, right? Like, and there are going to be many uncomfortable trade-offs. And I think we can talk a little bit about those per the calls that we have, why those trade-offs are being made. But again, to reiterate that we've been charged with maintaining the health and safety, right? And that is the first charge that we've kind of been giving. Can you, so.
I think, thank you, Cara, and the Department of Education has laid that out quite emphatically in the framework. And the top priority is health and safety. Second is social and emotional, mental health and well-being. And then there are the educational programming and our means of delivering that to students in these different scenarios. So thank you for saying that. And the plan is very dense in guidelines and protocols relating to health and safety, as we understand that absolutely needs to be in place. So we have some good resources here for families, but clear protocols. When I talked about establishing, and I know that we've had this conversation before about a policy for compliance with face masks, and again back to conversations with staff, and we've heard some good suggestions just through our reintegration committee, and it's a group of 20 plus, but in the same sentiment expressed by our first caller tonight, helping teachers get the support they need to deliver, the service that the school can provide right now to students. And some of that is the the social emotional support. Some of it's ensuring that students are, maintaining the 3 feet of distance. And, one of the reasons why we decided to order the desks, eh, well, one of the reasons is, the tables, many of them were 4 feet long. So a division of that doesn't provide the distance we need, but that an individual desk is a space. It's a child's own piece of real estate in the room, and the boundary is defined. We're trying to minimize the amount of time that when we do reintegrate, and teachers find themselves back in classrooms, they're not spending all the precious time that they have with students trying to regulate and manage these behaviors. We are going to take some time, and that's part of the orientation in the beginning. And originally when I wrote that piece August 1st, is that we'll need that just to work with our staff, talk to kids about what it's going to be like to be in this new environment and have this school experience, where there's a lot of regulation. I mean, that's the honest truth of it, and how we can all work through that together. And again, embedded in the health office protocols, and these are evolving. And I want to talk about communication and what to do. There are protocols as defined by the CDC on suspected infections. If someone's symptomatic, what are those procedures? But essentially, what happens when the main CDC identifies someone with COVID-19, and it's a person in the building, or potentially a person that's, say, a teen that rode the bus to school from Albion to Fairfield and moved through their day, and did that for a couple of days, and then we have a positive test. So that is reported to the CDC, and of course there's privacy protections, HIPAA health protections in place.
We just paused for a moment because we could hear that the audio was getting a little bit behind what was actually happening.
All set. All right. So I apologize. Network lag. So in this case, when positive test is reported to the CDC, an epidemiologist reaches out to the patient, and an investigation is conducted. You can't hear it. Okay. So close contacts with a positive person who may have been exposed are identified and contacted. So there is a procedure, but that is a circumstance where, and that's the piece of opening schools and contact with a lot of people in a space. And there are procedures for return to school after they have recovered from illness. Technology, as I noticed, I'm just going through some of the components of the plan, and as I said, we're fortunate that the district had in place one-to-one computing prior to our March closure. So as students participate in remote learning, the district will be utilizing online learning platforms and video communication technology on a daily basis. And teachers are prepared to use Google Classroom. And there will be time in the opening days of school dedicated to preparing and supporting students for a remote learning experience. And I did hear the question about professional development, and certainly when schools closed earlier, and I mean from the remote platform, the board had taken action on that for June 5th, and we had professional development time for teachers on that end of the school year that was dedicated to use of technology to facilitate instruction and learning. And we intend to dedicate a week prior to the opening of school, beginning August 31st. So teachers will have classroom prep day, but we have PD lined up to address this very need, and we have heard that expressed by teachers, and we are fortunate. One of our board members, Beth Lambert, who is not with us tonight, also works for the Department of Education and has facilitated and worked on the development of a online learning platform. And she herself is going to be working with our staff in the opening week for teachers, as well as another provider that is going to work on student engagement in a remote environment, virtual learning platform, and some training on working with, say, the flipped classroom. I know Cara had mentioned that. So we know that need is there, and we have carved out time and very explicit supports and PD for those needs identified. Another survey went out to teachers. I think Lori is pulling those. Okay, so that's teachers and educational technicians who will be involved that week. So transportation that poses some significant challenges, and I think we've talked at length about that, that the district will provide the transportation, but the restriction is a child to a seat that, greatly reduces the capacity of those bus runs. And I talked about some of the protocols that will need to be in place, the assigned seating, loading buses from the rear to the front, the recommendation, if we can possibly lower several windows just slightly to improve the ventilation on the bus. Students will be wearing masks on the bus, and up to 2 children are allowed in each van that we use to transport students, and some of these students are going off-site to some specialized programming. And so the total capacity of the van cannot exceed 3, and that would include the driver. Some of the measures in place for our facilities, and again, we've discussed these. Some of the signage, for example, that we're about ready to lay down in the building to support, encourage, help remind students of the need for social distancing. I think if anyone attended the Lawrence High graduation, that was as good of experience as I think it could possibly have been, but we have so the paw prints on the entrance walkways that they're going to carry into the buildings to just have a visual reminder for the older students on what that space is, and also for the younger children to know this is 3 feet, this is 6 feet, and this is how we need to travel through the buildings right now. The sanitizing and disinfecting and cleaning will be done daily. All right. high touch points. The custodial staff will be trained in that. We talked last week about the manpower, the hours that that's going to take beyond the usual. We've looked at even contracting with some additional service providers to assist us with that. We've bought equipment that will be used, the sanitizing guns, sprayers that are battery operated. If you think about the buses arriving here in the morning, the 7 through 12 students leaving the bus, the drivers need to sanitize the bus and head out for an elementary run, elsewhere in the district. That is part of the reason why the school day will be shorter. It's just our ability to get them from their family's doorstep to our school buildings. Attention to traffic flow for drop off, pick up, the logistics of that, and understanding that parents, visitors' access to the building will be, beyond reduced. And that is through our guidance from the CDC to reduce the possibility of exposure and transmission, that we not have that traffic in the building. So that's some of the work that's taking place to move staff and set up say an office checkpoint in the entryway, and I'm thinking of the one that's been installed at Benton Elementary. So that is something that's going to change, and parents and families will be educated on that, and likely, we'll have some video footage of the interior of these buildings so people can prepare and children can see, what it's going to look like. It's going to be a more austere environment, and some of the routine access to the building is just not able to happen for a period of time, and we don't know how long that's going to be, but it's something that needs to be ensured. One-way markings for direction. You think about in the elementary settings, typically I see students moving from their classroom, say, to their special or to lunch or to the library, and usually their teacher is with them, and they're walking along, usually in a line. Now that'll have to be 3 feet apart, but in a junior, senior high school, the bell rings at the end of the period or the block, and students leave the space, and the group is reconstituted. And one student might leave a section of chem and go to English, and another from that chem section is going to, say, head down to the first lunch mod, or head down to U.S. history on that junior wing. So that's going to take some time and training and understanding that moving around in the building is not going to be as it has been. So those are all pieces for consideration. The installation of plexiglass. We began earlier this summer with measuring and identifying. We went building to building, and that they are installed in places where people have frequent, closer contact with others, in libraries, in our secretarial workstations. But we've also gone ahead and purchased plexi barriers for teachers and techs in their work areas. And those that portion of the order hasn't arrived, but those two will be installed in all the spaces. And again, keeping people safe and healthy is, at the center of the work we're doing right now. Our business office has been reorganized with a divider. That's one of the places that's a public space and will continue to be a space that's accessed by the public in the school system. So the other pieces of the plan include individual school plans, and it's much of it is the standard language just to affirm and ensure and acknowledge that for each one of these buildings, these measures are in place. Um, we recently submitted our CRF Coronavirus Relief Fund application, and there are 5 or 6 questions on the front of that before you even get to building the budget. And these monies have paid for these materials and some of the staffing that we know we're going to try to secure. But the superintendent has to affirm that we have plans in place and the training that's going to happen and the continual monitoring to assure that we are meeting those standards set forth by the Maine Department of Education. So it's important, just as a matter of compliance and even receiving funds from the U.S. Treasury. So individual principals, and they'll be working with their staff when they are conducting. They're probably going to have more virtual meetings and building schedule and planning time. I know that principals have worked on schedules for socially distancing recess time, and that is more regulated and fewer kids are going to go out on the grounds, again depending on the facility, but they've been out there looking at space and seeing, again, that is something that will need to be managed so we don't have people being in a situation where they're just too close to one another. So those are carved out. As I said, bathroom plans, plans for hand washing times. Lunch is something that I mentioned earlier will be a feed, smaller groups in that facility. With a lot of real estate for fewer bodies is what's going to happen. We've also ordered tents and canopies. The department, in some of the conversations that I've been part of, is suggesting as much as we can, as often as we can, have opportunity for outdoor learning, instruction activities. And of course, we absolutely agree. Again, that will be managed by building principals and scheduled. But we have tents. We know, say in September, excuse me, that sometimes we have. It seems to never fail that we have these sweltering hot days just when we open school. And to have kids out in the sun, in the heat, is also a concern. So we have some tents that are going to go up just for an opportunity to get outside and have some shelter. I think one of the other pieces I wanted to just touch on, again, the school days are compressed. In elementary setting, students are assigned a teacher. There are some classes in the district, and probably the upper grades in the elementary schools, where students might swap for science or social studies between a couple of teachers, and then their specialists are scheduled in the day, and that's when teacher planning time usually occurs. But again, in the junior, senior high, they're in a space, the bell rings, and they go to the next space. So the principals have been working on reduced time for those class periods and not assigning who's where, but just that the class periods are going to run 50 minutes in the junior high. And I believe Mr. Bowers has drawn down that time in the high school as well to accommodate the briefer day. but students could expect that change who were enrolled in the schools previously. One of the other events coming up in the opening of school in the school year. So if we could just talk about moving the start date to September 8th and some adjustments in the very early piece of the calendar. And that's all we're addressing right now. We don't know what's around the corner. So the teacher workshop and service days will begin on August 30th, and that will be through September 4th. Of course, Monday, the 7th is the holiday. And the 8th will be the first day of school for grades 1 through 6, 7 and 9. And then on the 9th, Wednesday, grades 8 and 10, 12 will join the group. So on the 8th for grades 7 and 9, those will be the only students in the building that day, as we traditionally have a 7th grade orientation and a 9th grade orientation. And those activities would run as normal. The first day of kindergarten will be on the 18th. And I believe pre-K will be the 22nd. The other piece I wanted to touch on, and Jenny had mentioned this broader committee under school safety. So in addition to implementing the health and safety measures of COVID-19, MSAD 49 will continue to maintain practices that schools are ready for crisis emergency situations. I mentioned this last week. The board approves that comprehensive emergency management plan annually, and we conduct drills, safety drills throughout the year. But this plan will become part of that comprehensive emergency management plan. And I remember it was March 10th when we convened a crisis team to talk about pandemic planning, and it had not registered, I think, with many of us what was really just around the corner. And this idea that we'd have to have prevention, mitigation, and a response. One of the components of the plan, the continuity of operation, and that is important to hear, and we'll touch on it in a minute. Just our ability to staff our facilities to the degree that we can safely supervise children. And that is, if that's all we do on that day, then that's what it's going to be. But that is a fine line. We have, over the past several years, just with substitute coverage and a shortage of substitutes, has created some stressors on coverage in the buildings. But as anyone can expect, this will magnify the situation. Back to the CRF monies, setting aside some funds to hire permanent subs. It seems like a bit of an oxymoron, but that we have people that we traditionally call in the morning when someone calls in or can't report, or we find out the day before, that we are just going to have them in the buildings ready to assist us and help us supervise and facilitate all that. And I think we have secured about 10, and also securing substitute nurses. And I think we have a couple of individuals who are willing to do that. But if we can imagine, when we talk about what would prompt a closure, and it could be a temporary one, but it might be our nurses are ill, and how are we, triaging and managing the health situation in the buildings. So having permanent sub nurses in the district will help us in that way. But I just wanted to read this part. So in the main DOE framework, each school administrative unit's collaborative planning team, and we called it the Fall 2020 Reintegration Committee, led by the superintendent, is responsible for the development and annual review of their emergency operations plans. Your cloud planning team should include school nurses, administrators, educators, representatives from transportation, food service, local emergency responders, and local regional health experts. And this team should work together to determining procedures for the safe reopening of schools in each district. And included in this document are the members of that committee. It is large and broad: operations, transportation, business and finance represented, human resources, special education, food services, child care program, custodial services, principals, the Teachers Association, the Educational Technicians Association, the Employees Association, nurse, counselor, athletics, and school board members are all part of that group. And we will continue to meet weekly to look at the logistical pieces of ensuring that we have a smooth reopening and addressing changes in what feels like shifting sand oftentimes. If I could just take a minute to address some of the comment, and I do appreciate that, and I have heard about childcare. First of all, our own childcare program, and I have been working with Donna Carney, who is working hard through removing barriers and problem solving, as that is governed by the DHHS and Child Services, Child Development Services. We have licenses for 3 buildings. We have at Benton Elementary, and that was one mentioned, a before and after childcare program, a before and after school childcare program. We have at Fairfield Primary School, and that's an older group. At Fairfield Primary School, we have an all-day program for very young children, ages 3 to 4, I believe, and as provided through our agreement with KB Cap, who staff our pre-K program. There is some extended childcare in Albion. But when I last reported to the board a week ago today, I had spoken with Donna Carney, and she felt like she was in a good position and fully staffed. So in that week's time, 4 people who have done this work have had to leave. Many of the people who especially work with the before and after care at Benton Elementary School are or some of them college age students, and they're trying to align their own schedules as those higher ed institutions have changed what was in effect before. So we're all interconnected, and this has impacted our institutions, our organizations, agencies, our lives collectively. So Donna's working on that. Donna and I talked about the possibility, and this is a possibility. She was speaking with the person who does our licensing. What if we were able to rent some space in a facility, and what if we were able to, if that place met the specs of being licensed there, able to staff it? Is that a possibility? So she's looking into that. One thing that has changed is the fingerprinting in the background check that is now moved. What was processed by the Maine Department of Education now must be processed by this other agency, DHHS, and anyone hired after the 31st, they're guaranteeing us it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks to possibly process, and no one can do that work without that in place. So that's like mid-October. So again, we're trying to think about possibilities and remove those barriers. I've also been in conversation with a local agency who is planning and trying to coordinate with school districts, superintendents, local superintendents, but also trying to provide some service with priority to teachers and healthcare providers to relieve some of that stress. I heard again, our first caller, being on a wait list in several places is a hard thing when the opening of school is weeks away. So we're looking at that.
And Roberta,
Yes.
it's no comfort to our listeners or the people who called in, but this is like a national, the childcare issue is a national emergency. I mean, it's something that the United States has never done well, which is to provide adequate childcare, affordable, adequate childcare, I would argue. And so, it is the stressor. Like if you are looking at the news in other areas, it's the stressor all across the country, right? And the work is often falling unequally on, parents, right? To figure out how to manage that. So I think, there is a lot of empathy for that. And as a parent myself, I totally understand. And I thank you for doing that, because that is really above and beyond sort of our call, but we recognize that there is that connection and necessity. And it's just so unfortunate given the timing, the amount of time that it takes to license, and the fact that we didn't get some of these guidelines until very recently.
Mm. Thank you. And those are some guidelines that again have recently shifted, but it's, we are making an effort and trying to leave no stone unturned. And I hope next week, by the end of the week, I have an update on this, or it comes from a local agency who is able to share that. Within our own child care, you talk about the guidelines and the maximum capacity. So Donna still is faced with the same physical distancing restrictions that we're facing. So she's looking to utilize spaces in say the Benton building that hadn't been used by childcare before, and hopefully she's able to fully staff it. So that is work that's happening. And I did hear a comment about the scheduling and a decision to look at an every other day model. And there was mention of, supervision of children in the home environment is a concern, but an at-risk population. When I mentioned we have a population of students who are reliant on the schools to provide them with some essential needs. And I believe, and our principals team believe that, every day that we could possibly have children in our buildings, we would, dedicate ourselves to doing that. And that's really at the heart of that. So there are several models out there. It seems like very few school units are able to, guarantee 100% in person. I want to talk about that. I sent out a survey to families on July 7th. And there were, I think, 5 questions on that for the elementary, wanting to know who intended to send their children back to school, keep their children home. Okay. All right. Thank you. I guess I misspoke. I'll give update that kindergarten starts on September 14th. So just to clarify that, I apologize. So the July 7th survey. So again, the thinking was, we know how large the school, the class section sizes were. We went through every section in the district, and we looked at the space and what are the possibilities. What is the possibility that we could say, for example, full return to elementary? And it's not just Benton that is challenged with the distancing spaces. I think the board heard, or the committee heard a few weeks ago, when you were trying to guarantee 6 feet, and that wasn't calculated out, and you have a teacher backed into the corner of the room, that's not real comfortable or effective instructionally. So that said, I would be happy to take questions from the board.
I just wanted to, this is Jenny, I just wanted to make a comment on the possibility of modular classrooms, because that was something that was brought up, and that has been brought up to me in my regular job as an option that many school districts were interested in exploring. And we ran into a few issues with that as a possibility. First being the funding that is available to us through the coronavirus relief funds is very explicit on what dates are allowable for it to be used. You can only expend funds for something that is an incurred cost between March 1st of this year and December 30th of this year. Modular companies that lease out school buildings or houses or whatever those facilities are, don't create 4-month leases for people. They want leases that are minimally a year, and more realistically, they want something that's like a 5-year commitment. And that is not something that we would have the financial capacity to do, because the only funding we have would cover a 4-month period, and then the remainder of the time would be on the district to figure out. And who knows, hopefully we wouldn't need it for that long, you know, and then we'd be on the hook for leasing this building for years that we didn't need. Additionally, on top of that, you also need staffing to put in that building with the students. And again, the funding that we have, that the coronavirus relief funds that's coming through US Treasury, it's very explicit. You can only pay for things that is an incurred cost through December 30th. Unless there are changes to that piece of federal legislation, that is not something that can wiggle. I mean, there's no variability in that date.
Jenny,
yes.
can I ask Ms. Parr, can I ask a question?
Yes.
The monies that were assigned, you know, to help, is it done? Were they? I forget. So, please excuse me. Was it done based upon funding need, or like what was the formula for that?
I was not involved with the formula that was used to distribute the money from the Department of Education. The funding that was assigned by US Treasury was based on population.
So I like
the minimum amount that any state received was 1.25 billion, which is the amount that Maine received.
Yeah. So one thing though that I think is really hard for us to swallow, I'm just going to say it flat out, it's especially hard for me to swallow, which is, given that we are a rural area with lower income, there's already a perceived educational gap often, and we understand that the pandemic is creating even a bigger educational gap, and inadequate federal funding to do exactly what you talked about. Like, it's pretty reasonable thought to like, let's get some more buildings, right? But we also just can't, given the constrictions that we have, we can't invent that. And I think these are the types of things that I would ask listeners that really need to go back to Senator King and Collins and other people, where we really have to like say, as a state that has, you know, lower population and is not as wealthy as most of the other states, this pandemic is furthering our gap, our educational gap. And we are going to reach a moment of a tipping point, right, for how it is impacting our kids, that local authorities have little or no control over, like zero. So it's really not a no-win in any way, right? And I think that is something that at least I'm grappling with, which is feeling like, oh my God, there's a really bad alternative and a bad alternative, you know? Yeah, that was my last.
Okay. And just to make sure everyone is aware, we from the state level are continuing to advocate with the federal delegation to work towards minimally extending the date that that funding can be used. But I did want to make sure we touched on the topic of portable classrooms, because I heard that in this evening's call, and we've heard that come up before as well.
Nick, if I could add, it's just the personnel to staff the programming. You know, as we, I just learned, we're not able to fully staff our childcare program right now because we don't have a pool of people who are able or interested in that, and bus drivers, our fleet of buses, we are very tight on that. Our director of operations and transportation often finds himself out on the road driving school buses and serving as a monitor and driving vans, and that's just not something that's tenable. And we could hire if we had applicants. We tried to run a CDL program for licensing out of our adult education program. So we're trying, we're continuing, we're advertising, and I wish there's a shortage of teachers nationally. So we know that need is there, and connecting with the people who are willing to do the work. Again, I'm grateful to the people in the community that said they'd be willing to serve as our permanent subs and just help out in the buildings any way they can as assigned. So I appreciate that. So the first survey, if I could just touch on that, because that has been confusing, I think, to some people. We were looking for who's sending their child back, who intends to access our program remotely if they don't intend to, who needed a bus ride to school. I probably should have said to or from. If you need any use of our bus fleet, we wanted to know that, and the question of childcare. And at that time, that would be a rationale to get students into the buildings as often as we can.
Hey, Roberta, I just got a couple questions that I just want to clarify for people.
Okay.
As far as daycare, if we go hybrid, we're going to have 2 days that kids will be in childcare. Is the childcare going to be required to have them log in and do the schooling?
So our childcare program for older school-age children, we don't have that. We only have the before and after.
Yep.
And I talked to Donna. That's a separate type of license. We aren't licensed for that right now to have all day, with the exception of the very small children at the primary school. So I didn't understand you. I'm sorry.
You can't understand me?
No, did I misunderstand your question? I'm sorry.
No, some of the people are wondering that if we go hybrid, like teachers and stuff like that, while they're teaching 5 days a week, we're going to have students 2 days a week in childcare somewhere, whether it be here or where. Are they going to be required to? Is childcare going to be required to have those children log on and do schoolwork?
Oh, okay. I apologize. I don't know that would be an arrangement. Again, the MSAD 49 childcare program doesn't offer anything that happens during the school day anyway. But I guess that would be a conversation between families and providers and the children. They'll certainly have their devices with them. I mean, they're assigned to them, and there will be resources that are hosted, that a child could access.
Right. And the other question, just to clarify for everybody, if the teachers that have students are going 5 days a week to teach, and we're doing a hybrid 3 days a week, if those parents do not have childcare, teachers don't have childcare, they're not going to be able to attend to teach. What are we looking for? Hybrid for 5 days a week for the teachers and students 3 days, or?
So there are, it's essentially an expansion of FMLA for the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. I misquoted, said relief, but I think it's response. And I sent a letter to every employee in the school district, and there are 6 qualifying reasons for needing an employer to make accommodations, and that's on an individual basis, and what's reasonable and what's feasible for the employer. And some are health, and they're COVID caused reasons. And exposure to it, you're caring for someone who has it, you have it yourself, and you're being quarantined. But it the loss of childcare is one of those reasons. Whether that it doesn't define what the accommodation is and needs to be. But again, there's a fine line, and the provisions of that are a certain number of time for leave, and then a certain amount of benefit and compensation that is provided as you're into this expansion of FMLA. So as a follow-up to my letter, I asked any staff member to contact me, contact Amber LaFrance, our HR person. And of all our employees, I think about 15 have, and it's been for a variety of those reasons. And among that, and we haven't sorted out what that will be. But we also know, and back to the lack of people in a classroom to, instruct. And I know it's a really difficult situation, and a dilemma for people that they don't have answers for. So that would be on a case-by-case assessment. But people employed by school districts, people employed by hospitals, people employed by, Maine state government. There are parents, everywhere in all kinds of roles who, as Kara said, find themselves in this situation. And I cannot imagine, the pressure that causes. So anyway, Amber is sending out a form to solicit some more information from those individuals who notified us, and we'll go from there.
I just wanted to break it down, clarify it a little bit more.
Thank you.
Roberta, this is Rachel. I have a question. There seems to be confusion about what the actual expectation is of the children for remote learning. Can you clarify that a little bit better for parents? Because, if your child is home and has the ability to log in, that's great. If your child is at daycare because you're an essential employee, what does that look like? I think we need a clearer expectation for parents to kind of navigate.
And I think that is something that, I alone can't define. We've had general conversation, and that, as I mentioned, I outlined attendance, participation. I apologize. All right.
But
So,
Roberta,
yes.
I think for a point of clarification, though, the district, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the district has provided childcare as an extra, not as a, how do I say that? It's not something that's in our collective bargaining agreements. It's something that it's done because it recognizes it, and we really have very little or no control what goes actually on in the program.
Correct. It's an MSAD 49 program, but it's a self-funded program. It's
right.
Parents pay for the service,
and we don't create or oversee the curriculum there.
At childcare? No.
Right. So I think that's what
I don't believe that's a question though that's being asked. I think it's actually being asked if it is in a private childcare in
Right.
Waterville at somebody's house, are they going to be expected to be on a laptop at 8:40 because that's when their English class is?
Right. Yeah, and I
That
understand that. We've been talking about, the synchronous versus the asynchronous, but I think that remote learning or a child on the off day, I will be in a situation where they might be working independently depending on the age of the child. And again, that's the thing of it, when the child's not in the school's custody, we can't ensure what happens, but that's not going to be a requirement that children are synchronously logged on. And I think that's part of our PD, is that we need to think of other avenues, and the element of time is something that is not what it was. And the idea that children are in a physical space with their teacher is not the case. It'll be on some days. And so that is a conversation that's going to be defined through the talks with, and I'm thinking particularly, high school staff and a credit-based system and a 4x4 where classes are going to end in a semester. What's entered in Infinite Campus? What reflects student learning and progress? And we'll have to rethink those. But I think, for example, the online platform that's been developed by educators and facilitated by the state of Maine Department of Ed is something that's probably project based, where a student can work through activities and not wholly be connected and logged into some software or in front of a laptop screen for 6 hours of their day. And I know that we're working on kind of reimagining what that experience can be and still support learning.
I think in the elementary schools, we've talked about how the kids in general stay in one classroom. In the junior high, there generally is more movement. Is the intention this year for the junior high kids to move class to class, or will they be staying more in class and having the teachers move?
I believe they're going to move class to class, but again, that could be something that's evolving. In the secondary, so teachers are content assigned. Is it lagging? And we have rooms set up for science lab. We have materials set up for math class. So because it is a content assigned setting, as far as how we're staffed, I expect the children are going to move. And they too, like high school, they're reconstituted. So there are 8th grade classes and 7th grade classes, of course, but those teachers' schedules, say there are 6 periods in the day, and a science teacher has 3 7th grade sections and 3 8th grade sections. So it matters who they're assigned, or they have multiple grades. Unified arts, different rotation.
Roberta, this is Danielle. I have a question. Dealing with the different options that parents have if they want to go remote or send their child in person or learning, will students and parents have the option if they find their first choice? Let's say they go hybrid and they come to in-person learning and it's not working out. Are they going to be able to have the choice to switch to the virtual learning?
Yes, and for the purposes of the 3 scenarios, and I wish we were in the full in-person, but if a family opts to not even participate in the hybrid, the every other day, but changes their mind, yes, we'll work with that. I think other school units more broadly, again, 30 days, 45 days ago, when school systems were looking at capacity, how can we get everyone back, with the thought that there would be some who would opt to choose remotely. It would draw down those section sizes enough to say anyone who wants to come back can. That would be the ideal. And again, back to the survey we just took, and we're trying to figure out who is coming back, where they live, and do they need a bus ride. So that was this last survey, just drawn down to that information. But part of it is, so if you're in a full return based on that information and 5% change their mind, then suddenly everyone's back in a hybrid because you've exceeded your maximum capacity. So it's so unfortunate how we've had to think about all these situations, but that's the case. And in regard to the survey, in July, the responses looked who is intending to send their child back as soon as we're able to open our doors, or how many, what percent, high 60s, mid 70%. And now the surveys most recently put out with, we're trying to get 100% response. Principals are calling for those who didn't complete it, but it's approaching 90% of families intending and wanting their children to return to school. And I surely wish we could accommodate that. Right now we can't, but things may change.
Roberta, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Katrina.
I think it's a quick question, and I hope you didn't already answer it. I know we have set up for a teacher in service at the beginning and all that, but when do you think teachers are going to be able to get back to their rooms? Is that going to be just then? We're waiting for that, or?
It's a pretty tight schedule. And we met with our reintegration group, and I've heard from teachers and our association. The buildings are not ready. Those employees need to be able to, I brought some of the signage with me that needs to be laid down in layers of wax waxed over, and measured out in the hallways. The furniture is not here. Those desks are not here yet. Over 1,000. They need to be put in place. The custodial staff is going to install them in the rooms to ensure that the distancing is there. The projects are not finished. The hallways are not ready. And, we can't open the doors to kids by the 8th unless these things are in place. And they are working very hard to get that done. And it's not done yet. And the equipment is not all here yet. The materials have not all arrived. So that's where we're at. At the very least, it'll be the 31st, and it'll be, the bargain classroom prep day. If we could get everything done by, say, the Friday before, we'll try, but it is very tight.
Roberta, I had a couple of questions. As I understand it, we are going to a hybrid system because we do not have the space capacity in our buildings to have all students there. Classrooms aren't large enough that we can meet the 3 or 6 foot separation rule. Is it a mandate of the state, or are we legally required to provide the hybrid in the sense that I'm hearing an awful lot of problems with childcare? It's kind of a logistical nightmare in terms of whether or not students can attend. So my question is, do we have to provide a hybrid?
Versus 100% remote?
No, 100% in the classroom.
No,
the solution would be, okay, we've got our blues and grays, so for a student, the year would work out to be half a school year because they would only go every other day.
A semester enrolled for half the population?
No, the population would be enrolled, but they would only be half-time. They would be going every other day.
Okay, well, the hybrid we opted for was because we couldn't meet those space requirements. And the every other day that we are proposing relates to staffing. I think I'm understanding what you're saying. The transportation component. I think we're trying to offer a maximum of what we're capable of in the format that allows it and allows students in the buildings every day. It's just not the same population.
I have another question. Is there for our teachers, is there a specific hybrid curriculum for teaching their classes remotely? Or are we trying to do in-classroom instruction remotely?
Well, I think, and this is where our professional development will help us, and we've been having these conversations with teachers. But I think one of the outcomes of this, or the silver lining, as I was saying the other day in one of our meetings, is that we're rethinking what must be. And higher ed has been using this in of, I guess, a hybrid of it, where you have some options, and some of the programming you receive is not synchronous learning. I do know that when children are out, probably the best, most practical is to offer, say, a project-based program. And I think, again, that the Department of Ed has provided that with lessons and activities aligned to the guiding principles. I mean, everything flows from what is mandated by the state as far as programming and curricula that we need to provide to children. But I think going through the paces of the MSAD 49 curriculum is not something that we're able to do in time. Just back to the element of time. The school day is going to be shorter. We're going to be dedicating quite a bit of time to ensuring that everyone's safe and monitoring their health. So I guess prioritizing those key learning objectives is some of the work before us. So I think we would find great difficulty in trying to deliver the system as we have in the past. So, there's new thinking and new ways of doing things, and sometimes those methods are found to be maybe more effective.
I'll give you a direct question. Assume that I'm a fourth grade teacher and suddenly I'm going to teach fourth grade online, totally. Is there a curriculum that the district can purchase that will utilize the technology, that makes use of the technology in a way that the student can actually learn on the other end?
And I think that's where the Maine Department of Education has really helped us out with this online platform, with this whole host of activities and assessments that are aligned with the Maine learning results. So, that is the core of our programming. And I would expect that teachers, and they have been, accessing web-based resources that align with certain learning standards. I mean, English, math, language arts are aligned with Common Core, which is, delivered nationally. So it's just a matter of being open to, and we certainly are, learning opportunities that we're sure align with the guiding principles.
I'm hearing you say that there is no program out there that can be purchased.
We could probably purchase something, but this is like open source. I don't think we'll need to purchase this. One of the professional development activities we engaged in the end of the school year was working with the NWEA, the Northwest Evaluation Assessment tool. And part of what that does, and it is aligned with Common Core, is if we're able and have time to administer that to students, it will communicate where needs are and some gaps in learning. Just as, for example, of trying to recoup what might have been lost as critical learning opportunities, especially for young students in those foundational areas, and help us focus on that. So I don't think we need to buy a program. I think there are resources out there that are free. It's just a matter of coalescing them all together. And again, I think the department's done that for us. And all district teachers, K-12, will get some PD related to that resource out there. And I think that would be, if we can consistently use something, that will help us out.
Roberta, I have a sort of a follow-up question regarding the curriculum. Is the expectation that teachers will, obviously they're going to teach 5 days a week, but they're going to teach students on Monday, say squares and then letter A? Are they going to, and then the students at home are supposed to learn something? So on Tuesday, when the students from home, are they going to be learning squares and the letter A, or are they going to be expected to have learned that Monday and then they can move to triangles and B on Tuesday? Because really, are they going to be able to like move on day to day like they would, or are they going to be like getting half a curriculum in the school year?
I understand that question, and we've talked about this also. So again, it's the method of delivery is probably what the difference is going to be, and working with a flipped classroom, a teacher front loading some information. The significant difference in the hybrid is from March to June there was no I'm not present with you, to a situation. At least there'll be a few days a week, and every other week, 3 days a week, where the children are there. No, the curriculum is not going to be slowed to that pace where students on the blue cohort show up for their instruction, and then that's repeated the next day with the students in the gray cohort. How we work through that is again yet to be determined, where you need to spend some time with our teachers and talk through that, but that is not the intention.
Roberta, I have a question. This is Danielle. I have a question dealing with special ed and IEPs. So usually IEPs are done in person. So for IEPs that are coming up now and moving forward, how are those going to look like for the parents in the district, and especially for the IEPs that need to be updated now?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if they're being done or what's going on?
And I've had conversation with Amy McDaniel, our special education, who is here with us tonight. And if you don't mind, Danielle, we can call upon her to share that with you.
Sounds good.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes. Hi, Amy.
Okay, good. So we were advised at the beginning of the shutdown period that if we could not maintain the confidentiality of meetings because it was considered a closure, that we were to postpone those meetings. So if meetings could be held, if we could preserve the integrity of the meeting, of the confidentiality requirements and stuff, those meetings were held. Some were not. Prior written notices had gone out to parents. Some teachers had put them out there, letting parents know that we would be doing their meetings in the fall when school resumed and when monitoring through DOE picked back up. So when we start in the fall, we will be making up meetings that did not happen because of the closure. We have a list of those needed meetings in the office. Meetings will be done preferably virtually through Google Meets or Zoom. If a parent can't do that, then on a case-by-case basis, we will consider other options. Parents can join by phone. I may be able to join a parent at another location, but we are not going to be gathering the entire IEP team in one room. Does that answer your question, Danielle?
That answers mine.
Okay.
Thank you, Amy.
Yep.
Amy, this is Roy.
Hi, Roy.
I've had a few parents reaching out to me saying that they have called and left messages in questioning of IEPs, and they have not been reached back to. Just if we can clarify that a little bit, for everybody.
Sure. Parents are welcome to reach out to myself or my administrative assistant. I have not had any unanswered voicemails. I don't know if they're reaching out to me or maybe to the case manager. I've had one parent send me an email that they couldn't reach a case manager. But that's been resolved. So I'm not sure. If parents are contacting me, I do get back to them. Yeah.
I have to second that. This is Sarah, and I've had a few parents reach out to me as well. So if we could just make sure we're communicating that to families that are anticipating IEP meetings, I think it would go a long way to reduce undue stress.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
That would be great.
Yep. I can do a mailing. I can mail out a letter and I can post on our website. I'm happy to do that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, Amy. This is Rachel. I am curious what special education is going to look like for those kids who have IEPs and 504s. And I'm not sure if that's 100% you or Roberta or some combination.
I have reached out to our legal counsel at Drummond Woodsum to get some guidance on this and the best way to proceed. Unfortunately, I have not had a response yet. I'm anticipating one at the beginning of next week. Once I get that guidance, I will be happy to share a plan with you. I don't want to speak prematurely and cause confusion in a public meeting. So we will be looking at students on an individual basis, because I know there's been a lot of concerns expressed about students being able to tolerate wearing a mask and PPE. And that's part of the guidance that I'm looking for from our legal counsel.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
Yeah.
Roberta, this is Cara. I wanted to go back to Stu's question because I think it is the fly in the ointment for us, which is we currently have a public health crisis. Like the state has declared a public health crisis. We still have a declaration of a public health crisis. So in the ability to bring all students back at once, which I think everybody would be like, yeah, that's what we'd like to do, right? Because it removes every barrier that we're talking about. I just want, I think, people to have a little bit more clarity on what's preventing us from doing that, right? Because per what Amy just talked about, right? Like we're in an area of, these are guidelines that get attached to monies that have expectations. And there is like a weird legality about the enforcement of guidelines. And I think we just have to publicly acknowledge that. So I don't know. I mean, Beth, I hate to put you on the spot in that, but I do think that at least this sort of understanding about, there may be some districts, right, that decide that they are going to do full in-person learning, but I've got to think it's those districts in which there are little or no cases. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know. Can you just address that a little bit? Because I think people need to we need to understand why, right?
Yes.
Go back to questions. We really have to, people have to understand why, and that we also know it's highly imperfect, because I agree with what Heather was saying, which is, there's a certain age level in which I truly believe the flipped class, what's called in education speak, the high flex class, works actually kind of well, where you can basically give students content to, engage, and potentially they have to be self-directed at home. So there's a lot of assumptions that are going on here, right, for this to work. And these are the parts where I think we're going to obviously know that it's not going to work for every student, and we shouldn't assume that it is. But anyway, but to get back to the why are we not choosing, and what are our legal obligations, right? Our health and safety obligations that are putting us in the position that we're in, because that's what I think we need to address.
All right, and I did read through them in the beginning, and the letter I sent August 1, I made hyperlinks in that letter that points directly to the why, but I will share it again.
Yeah, because I think that this is the thing where, right, people just need to understand why we're not choosing to bring everybody back in the classroom at once, which would eradicate every one single of these issues, right?
Right.
So let's just rehash that so people.
Okay. So in the coding of the counties, and I explained there are two drivers. What is the current health situation, Maine County's risk of COVID-19 spread for schools, and the school's capacity for implementing the health and safety requirements. And within that, there's clarification right in if a person, an individual wanted to go to the Maine DOE framework for returning to classroom instruction, right in that first page of that document, there's an explanation of that. So the counties in the state, all 16, are green. So we are seated in Kennebec County, and that is our Benton School, our Clinton School, and our Albion schools, and Somerset County, which involve Fairfield Primary School, Lawrence Junior High School, and Lawrence Senior High School. Designated green. So the MDOE further states, so this is schools may open if these two provisions are in place. We have green status, and that schools are able to meet. Schools in green counties may need to use a hybrid instructional model if there is insufficient capacity or other factors related to facility, staffing, geography, transportation that may prevent the full implementation of the health and safety requirements as identified by the Maine DOE framework for returning to classroom instructions, 6 requirements for protecting health and safety. So, and I had read through those requirements, but they relate to ensuring that everyone does symptom screening at home prior to before coming to school. That's something that we could probably mitigate with some training and some expectation. It's the physical distancing and facilities. So this idea that children, and initially it was 6 feet among all people, including the children. The spacing between the children has been drawn down to 3 feet. And we just can't provide that in our classrooms. And additionally, 6 feet needs to be maintained between an adult and any person, including children, in the buildings. And that physical distancing expectation requirement extends to our school buses. So in this school district, we probably, unlike our neighboring school districts, we have a fleet that has a capacity that forces us to do 2 bus runs every day. Our neighbors might not have that situation, but we do. So, and we have a pretty broad geography for the school district. So if you think about 1 child per seat on a school bus, that's, less than half of, depending on the age of the child, what we typically transport. You can see the logistics. We would be moving children all day, and trying to get all people into the buildings. And once they're in the buildings, we can't ensure that we're providing that distancing. I know you understand that and you're helpful. It is frustrating, but it is a requirement that we have to meet in order to open the buildings up.
Thanks, Roberta, because I think obviously if we had a different geographic population, maybe even a smaller population to serve, right? Like we could be in the position to have full instruction. But it is that sort of challenge for us, and they are guidelines that, I mean, they're not even calling them guidelines, they are saying they are requirements. And we are in a public health emergency, which puts us in a position of needing to follow requirements for a whole host of reasons. Which is unfortunate, because I do think I have grave concerns about the curriculum, grave concerns. I think, I'm just going to say, from teaching college, I saw enough challenges there with students that, were quote unquote adults and, who had invested quite a bit of money in their educational process, right? I'm not sure that I think a first grader without a structure around them can actually be self-directed. And because we haven't built up, the community aspect that we need, not just us, but every surrounding school district nationwide, to have the coordination with the caregivers, to kind of kick in on that. And that's why people are doing these educational pods. But I don't know. It feels like we're in like a really no good situation here, because I do think children's education are going to suffer. And I think we should be candid about that. I don't think we should try to say that it's going to be something. I mean, people are going to try, but it's not optimal in any way, shape, or form. Which, it's not anybody's fault, you know what I'm saying? We're like, it's a pandemic, right? So I don't know. Anyway, thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Roberta, I think I already know the answer, but I just want to clarify, because it's been asked to me a couple times. We made adjustments to the calendar, obviously, and I understand all that. Is the intention to, and I know the unknown, but is the intention to keep the calendar the same as it was previous, other than the adjustments at the beginning that we made?
Well, one of the things that the board will address in the near future, and we'll have a conversation with the association as well, but we're required a minimum number of student seat days. So that is something that we're going to have to address, and when that happens and how we're able to creatively tackle that will be something for a near future conversation.
Sorry, I guess I didn't really. I meant more like the first semester and I'm sorry, I didn't word it right, but the quarter ending October 30th and
yes.
blah blah blah. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Yes,
No,
we
I totally understand.
yeah. Well, we talked today. I don't think we're going to alter that date. It's going to be, you know, time spent at the opening anyway. And
Yeah,
probably
no,
quite
it's
a bit of
fine. I
it
was
is going to be something else. So I think we should, probably try to keep intact that pacing for
okay.
the quarters right now, and you know,
Keep it as
problem solve that soon.
uniform as we can. Thank you.
Of course.
Roberta, this is Heather. I have just a couple other clarification questions from the plan. Um, for the symptom screening at home, is it just an assumption that if you get on the bus and go into school that the kids are teacher free? Like, is it something you have to go into the app and sign in and declare that your child is symptom free?
We're and again, I don't know what piece of software we're going to use. That's for our employees.
Okay.
But we're going to educate families and say, in good faith, and here's the checklist that you do that at home, and respect that.
Sure. And then I was just confused. So yesterday in the reintegration meeting, Lori talked about that the bus routes was going to be done by, that the blue and gray days were going to be picked by bus routes and households. And then in the high school reopening plan, it says blue days are going to be A through J and gray days are going to be K through Z. So to me, if we're looking to like reduce bus runs, like you could have someone, a Jones that lives on High Street.
And that's thank you. That's a good question. That's just a general delineation.
Okay.
That might be their finer adjustments to those sections to ensure that what Lori was trying to do. And back to the survey, and thank you to the families who took the time to fill all that information in, because the survey results interface with Infinite Campus, our student information system, and the TransFinder software that Scott uses to run the routes interfaces there. And Lori was just trying to identify who, because all students are going to be rostered to their teacher, but some of them might be 100% remote. So when we look at those rosters, or the software system sees them and they identify this is a student who doesn't need to ride the bus, and that will not be pulled into that bus route software. So this is automated instead of a lot of manual entry, and then fine tuning it once we look at what the system puts out. So I hope that explains it.
Okay. Another question, where am I? And this may be coming out later, like with from the nurses, but cold season is coming and doesn't mean you got coronavirus. So what is that going to be like more like very specifically, like if say a child has a sore throat, like it's just a sore throat, like are they going to be expected to get to go to the hospital and get a COVID test and wait for that result to come back, or quarantine for 14 days and do like remote learning for a cold?
Yeah.
And I get that the symptoms are all intermingled and it's hard to differentiate just based on symptoms if it's a cold or COVID. So like, what is that expectation?
Well, the nurses are working that protocol, but that is something that those are pretty clean protocols that are, they're modeled, they'll be modeled after, pulled right from, CDC. And again, what you see there has been expanded to finer points. They have shared a 9-page document with me today to try to help parse out and triage, if you will, who needs this response and who. But a fever, presenting with a fever is a pretty general system. So there'll be more information coming out and maybe evolving guidance on that. But we're going to follow what the Maine CDC provides as guidance.
Because, I mean, you could be looking at
Mhm.
large populations out for long periods of time. I mean, obviously, if a fever is caused by, like, they're seen by a doctor and, oh, you have an ear infection, like it's not COVID, you know, but if you look at, you know, a cough, you know, or sore throat or vomiting diarrhea, well, you shouldn't be at school with vomiting diarrhea regardless, but, you know, it's just hard, you know, I'm comfortable as a parent sending my, like, oh, like you have a cold, but, you know, I'm like a old cynical nurse who I'm like, you're fine. Like, you don't have a bone sticking out of you. Like, you're okay.
And I think it would be helpful for you to take a look at what we generate or continue to do. We'll be meeting again Wednesday. But one of the pieces, and it's sorting out who needs this kind of care and who needs just some general care. I think one of the things they added to the document, you know, classroom-based interventions and how are teachers referring children to the nurse's office and why, and you know, there'll be other staff maybe who are trained in dispensing medication or you know, treating some of the other symptomatic things that kids present with. But the fact that fevers, I mean, that's a pretty common occurrence, well, especially with little ones. So I think initially we're just going to have to work through and fine tune our response to that. But I have not seen anything in guidance that goes to that extreme of, you know, quarantine for 14 days unless you've been exposed to someone who's COVID positive. What would help us greatly is testing, and everyone knows that, and maybe something that happened or some results that are more timely. You think about just even a 2-day turnover, 48 hours as a person's moving around in contact with people. So, but yeah, it's important that if you're not feeling well, you stay home. And that's articulated. We'll train staff about that. We'll communicate that to families.
But I do think, Roberta,
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, Roberta, to your point, and I mentioned this last meeting. I mean, I haven't hit send yet on my letter to Dr. Shaw and Janet and Pender Macon, but I'm like, without testing, this seems, I mean, even just testing to open up the school to figure out who are asymptomatic carriers. Like, I have a certain level of uncomfortableness with, I understand all the challenges around false positives. You know, I get it. I've been listening to Dr. Shaw's thing, but without adequate tests, we can't, per Heather's point, which is exactly on, it's like, you know, we're just taking a gamble with it. And that just seems not good for anybody's time. You know, parents would, you know, would like to be able to send their kid to school, you know, regardless, right? And the test would obviously go a long way in determining that. So I would basically, you know, for anybody's listening, it's like, get in touch with the state government and be like, you want this, you know, you want to return, but you got to have testing. Like, it just seems completely ridiculous for a whole host of reasons. That's my 2 cents for that one.
Well, I mean, I'm not looking to have every student tested every day. I want to make sure I understand the guidelines of when I can not receive a call from work saying your kid has a sniffle, you need to go get them tested. You know, I would hate to, I don't want to get COVID tested. You know, I would hate to put my child through, you know, having it tested. I mean, I will if they say, oh, well, she has this and she can't come back to school until she does. But I would hate to put a multitude of students through unnecessary testing when there have been 0 cases of COVID in Benton and 0 cases of COVID in Albion and less than 5 cases in Fairfield. you know, and there's 2
Well,
active cases in Somerset County. So I'm not afraid of COVID. However,
That's known cases. I mean, I would argue that because we don't have testing, we don't know all the asymptomatic. And what most people are finding is that a big portion of the population does have.
well, there's probably a big portion of the population that has asymptomatic. People get pneumonia and they don't get tested and they live and survive, and people don't get tested for influenza and they live and survive. There are lots of viruses and illnesses that people do not go to the hospital and get tested for, and we all live and survive.
I think you're missing my point, and I didn't make up a pandemic here, so I'm not.
No, and I'm not either. And I've lived through a multitude of pandemics, and I'm not having a medical argument about this. I'm trying to clarify that if based on these symptoms, if children are going to have to be required to have a negative COVID test before they can return to school.
And the answer to that is no.
Okay.
Unless they've been exposed to someone who was positively identified and they've been in a certain amount of space for a certain duration of time. I think it's like 15 minutes. But it's stay home, just like with fever and chills, stay home till you're symptom free. And things pass in a day or two. So,
thank you.
Yes.
I have a couple questions.
Roberta.
High school students.
Yes.
With the packet that we have now, and we've mentioned tonight, a 5-block schedule, students picked, 4 classes. What does that do to their schedule?
And thank you. That's a great question. That's not necessarily the direction they're going right now. When I talked with the building principal and his assistant today, and maybe just leaving things as they are and were. Of course, registrations happened in the spring. Kids have those schedules, and we're going to stay with that likely.
Okay, and then a second question.
Yes.
If you're a blue student, are you able to attend your athletic practices on a gray day when you are not in school?
I would say yes. And again, your athletic practices in the fall are outside where it's, more people in the building's not going to infringe on the distancing. So that's a great question.
Thank you.
Roberta, I have another question. I'm sorry.
Nope, that's fine.
I know you've done a lot of work for the training for the process of the PPE and all the hand sanitizing and washing and how they're going and all of that. And I know it's been a ton of work. In my opinion, we're probably relatively quickly headed for remote learning for everybody. That's just my opinion. But have we thought about any training for staff specifically with the remote learning? Because we felt a little short in March because we didn't have time for anything. I totally understand. Yep. And then also training for students while we may only have them for a short time. And it's not a bad thing to learn if we end up having a miracle and have them all year. Have there been any discussion on training for that?
Yeah. Of course. Thank you. That's a great question. And that's part of, and we'll start with the student experience first. Part of that opening period of time, and I called it an orientation, that we purposefully dedicate staff working with students of all ages on how to access programming when I, the teacher, am not here with you. So we have a good opportunity for that. And in regard to the professional development, I mentioned when school closed, we had a week of PD that was dedicated to that very thing, working with Google Classroom, working with NWEA, and right now, and I'm trying to line up some training with the Maine Department of Education, but we have this week opening up, and we have already dedicated some time working with this organization called Logic Wing, and it's
I'll just read some of the topics. The basics of a flipped classroom is what they're calling that. Assigning and annotating digital materials, transforming to digital content, using inquiry-based approaches, web literacy, exploring good research practices are among a few. So it's the substance of materials and of like a methodology of delivery. And I'm hoping that Beth could speak to a piece that she's going to share with our staff and related to that online platform and what educators and the DOE have worked together to develop.
Right now, so you're asking?
Yes, please.
Got it. Okay, I didn't want to jump in. Yeah, where we've sort of talked about this idea. The department has been working all summer with educators from throughout Maine, creating online modules that teachers can use, students can access, all free and open to them. And so I think, we'll talk more about the details, but we're going to talk about, how teachers can think about integrating those and connect them to the curriculum that they're already using and use it as a way to help assign and enhance a student's learning experience as they're in their remote environments, and continue, not just enhance, but continue the learning in these set modules that have been created. Some of them are short term, some of them are much longer term, especially for some of the older students, so that they can engage in them over time and fill quite a bit of content area. So we're excited about it, and my hope is just to help thinking about how do you integrate that when you already have your curriculum set and you already have what you're thinking, because we tied them to all of the standards in the Maine Learning Results, so they should cross over at some point throughout a teacher's curriculum that they've already developed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta, for that. I would like to share the utmost importance I think that has, because in my mind, it's inevitable. And I think that's going to be a huge advantage if the kids can have training and the staff can have training.
And we are counting on that time and, looking forward to it. Thanks.
Does anyone have any more questions?
I have a question. This is Rachel. Roberta, we're talking about an every other day schedule. That is inconsistent with families, childcare, which we've already heard about. But can you elaborate more as to why that schedule was chosen versus what some of the other schools did, such as 2 days of consistency, maybe a day off, 2 other days of consistency, or any other system, so parents can kind of understand why that was picked?
Thank you, Rachel. I tried to express it initially, and it's looking at having kids in buildings present with teachers in our maximum capacity, and that is having children in our school buildings 5 days a week, and having as much contact as possible. If our goal is to try to move toward, a broader in-person experience, I guess. And there are many other supports that schools offer to children. And I think the more that we have them in the buildings, the stabler it is going to be. And I understand districts across the state are addressing this in, all sorts of ways, but for here, this is what we thought would work best for children and the programming they're going to receive. You think about and one thing I didn't even touch on tonight is our nutrition program, and those meals that we provide to children on a daily basis, and some of them, a portion of our population, count on that. Breakfast,
and lunch. And one of the things that I wanted to make the board aware of today, so it's meeting some very basic needs, broader than curriculum programming. And we feel that children will be best supported if we can, to our maximum capacity, get children in our school buildings and in contact with our teachers and all the other support people that are here, you know, our nursing staff, our counselors. Uh, you know, we have social worker in the building. You know, there's a whole network of services and supports that kids receive. So that was the thinking about that. But I did want to mention in regard to our nutrition program, we're still on the summer feeding program, and it is subsidized by the government. But that expires August 31st. But what that has allowed us to do, and it was initiated when we went into closure in March, is feeding children in ways other than they come into the cafeteria, we physically see them, we take their account and they get a meal. We've been handing out food through these sites, all our school sites, and then we had 3 satellite sites just on the buses in parking lots and you know, say an area church or Big Apple, that provided families with food. And I sure do hope that that August 31st date is extended, because if we go back to the National Nutrition Program, we're not able to deliver meals in that way. So even the concern about every other day of how to get a meal to a child who's not here. So for some, that might be several days. So that's what we're trying to mitigate with that. So that's the thinking behind it.
Okay, I was thinking like attendance, you know, with kids getting mixed up on which days they need to be here, as well as parents, and concerns for the younger students. You know, are the teachers going to have to do a lot of reteaching in between? Those are kind of my thoughts on, you know, having a couple of consistent days.
Yeah, I understand you, and I've myself worked in several high school. You know, we have just our 4x4 organization where there's semester courses. In some school districts, there are year-long courses every other day. So it's just a matter of what do we have the resources for? What is the greater need, and finding the model that works best. Thank you.
So kind of along those lines with, this is kind of referring to the same thing and kind of not, but you say like the sanitizing of the buses in between and all that, and I understand, but if the high school and junior high students are still going to move class to class, is there going to be sanitizing in between each time that happens, or?
Well, I think, yeah, because it's a different population coming into the space, and wiping those
Right.
desk services will need to happen. How that happens, or who is actually doing that, is we're working through that. But yeah, the buildings will be sanitized every day, not just a one day a week, and there'll be a regimen, a routine of moving through the buildings. But, and I think that's the part of what the guidelines are laying out, is the hand sanitizing and hand hygiene, and the mask wearing reduces the transmission of the virus if someone's a carrier. So those ritualized those routines are meant to help. Like every time you enter a classroom, that you're sanitizing your hand before you go into that space, is in part meant to minimize that exposure. We'll have wipes, and again, the sanitizing of the high touch points will be important. So we're working through how that's going to happen, just the logistics of it. But we know it needs to.
So, sorry, not trying to go backwards, but like to follow up with what Rachel said. So, is it possible, although I'm head explode thinking about like another schedule change, but say September 24th rolls around and it's like, nope, everybody hates the every other day plan. Like, would potentially the blue gray days change? Like, I know my head explodes thinking about every other day, like in person. You know, as a, you know, working parents trying to figure out what we're going to do.
I think we do need some consistency though, and we're gonna have to like trudge forward with whatever we do come up with, because changing is gonna be, I mean, I know this is all hard. Every single ounce of this is hard, harder than anything, but I also think that parents need some stability the best that we can. Stick to our guns and
Right, and I understand that, and I don't want to change it from like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then in 3 weeks change it to like a Monday, Tuesday, and then in 4 weeks change it back. Like, right, I'm not looking to like make everybody's head explode, but it just seems very difficult for, I mean, I completely understand the need to do the hybrid. However, where's my child going to go on Tuesdays and Thursdays or Monday?
I personally, I hate this. I'll just admit it. I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. I personally think that every option that we have is difficult. I
absolutely
Roberta
agree.
has been laid out difficult, and she's had to just go with what she believes, and we have to just, like, it's all hard, it's all difficult, it's all terrible, it's absolutely terrible, but we have to just move forward, and we can't second guess every single thing. We have to just try to make the best out of a terrible situation.
Right.
And she's worked very, very hard, and many others, not just her. I know there's a committee, and you and Danielle and Beth and Scott, and I could go on and on and on. But I just think there's a lot of what ifs, but nobody's plan is perfect. Even if we went with other plans, they're not going to be perfect. There is no perfect in this terrible situation.
And did I hear you say, Roberta, like, is the biggest concern, so say if you had like a Monday, Tuesday, and then say like Wednesday, I'm just like pretending here, and then like Wednesday was remote for everybody, and then like a Thursday, Friday, like, is the concern for like the lack of stability and lack of food and meals for the children from like Tuesday to the following Monday? Like, is that the biggest concern in the spacing of that many days in between like in-person education?
Yes, all those things of substance, but
Yeah.
just that we have already, we haven't, and the district hasn't, but kids have already been closed out of the school buildings for all this time. And I cannot imagine having these buildings sit here empty one day every week. And I mean, just that alone, in regard to changing what we've laid out, this is weeks and weeks and hundreds of hours of work. And what Scott Washburn has ahead of him, once we wrap up this final survey and get 100% beat on who needs a bus ride and who's coming back, it's going to take him a good couple of weeks to pull these routes together in an efficient way. You know, Scott's here. You can speak to that if you want to hear it, but it's work that's, you know, these staff have climbed a mountain to try to make this all coalesce. And, you know, my recommendation, we reevaluate. I mean, we'll, you know, be updating and assessing and fine tuning this for sure. But, you know, I'm just hopeful in, you know, 3 weeks from the opening, we're still in a, you know, a situation where we can sustain this hybrid.
Roberta, I have to thank you. from sitting on the reentry committee to meeting with the teachers, the ed techs, and the employees association, and all the work and everything that is being done to try to get the kids back into school has been an overwhelming feat. I don't think any person truly do this perfectly. Like everyone else, my mind is blown on how I'm supposed to do this and how my family's supposed to do this, doing these 2 weeks, the swapping of days, but we're going to figure it out and we're going to do it because that's what's being asked right now. And we have an amazing community, and hopefully we can all come together and figure this out. I know the plan's not 100%, and there's a lot of questions out there that still are not answered and a lot of unknowns, but I mean, we'll get through this. We're constantly meeting, and we just have to work together because I think more minds coming into this will be better in figuring it out. So I do agree with parents. It is frustrating. Believe me, it is so frustrating. But with that said, I make a motion to accept the returning to classroom instruction fall 2020 plan, with the understanding the plan will be reassessed by the board and will evolve based on the updates to guidance from the DOE and CDC.
I will second that.
It has been moved by Danielle and seconded by Stu to accept the returning to classroom instruction fall 2020 plan, with the understanding that the plan will be reassessed by the board and will evolve based on updates to guidance from DOE and CDC. Any further discussion?
I would just like to thank all the people that work so hard, and there's way too many people for me to personally list, and I would definitely forget somebody, but I know the members of the committee and the superintendent and all of the administrators and the staff and everybody that is so heartfelt in this and wants the best for every student that we have, and all of the board, and I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, Katrina, I want to echo that, and also understanding that you know, we don't have, this is all new territory, like, you know, and it's changing pretty rapidly, and we understand that we could use literally months more in a planning of this, right? But the goal, I think, to try to get kids back in the classroom, and understanding that it is highly imperfect, and that we will reassess. And I would also say that, you know, a larger conversation coming down that we should be aware we're going to have is once, hopefully, right, we're able to have a vaccine, or, you know, whatever other solution presents itself, maybe there's going to be enough schools that are able to do this and transmission rates are going to be low, and we can hope that controlled and et cetera. And, you know, maybe some of the guidelines will be lessened over time, but we're going to have to figure out how to make up gaps in learning, because there are going to be gaps in learning. And I think we just need to acknowledge that with this plan, because I don't want people to think I'm voting for something or supporting something without stating that, because it's impossible in this situation for it not to happen. And it's also, we didn't even get to talk about it tonight, but the challenges that students are going to have, and faculty and staff and the community members around the stress of this, is real. And I feel like, you know, the mental health and awareness and being gentle with one another, because there is so much that is not in our control at this moment, and we desperately want it to be otherwise, is real. And so kindness is certainly called for.
I have one thing I would like to address really quick before we vote on this plan. I do have concerns about the Fairfield primary plan on page 37, stating that for a group to use a playground safely, assigned times are required, which is completely understandable. But it also says more space is available at the park and a group can be taken there while a group is on the playground. Would that mean a teacher's responsible for up to 9 children in the park with traffic on all 4 sides that allows public access at any time? People who haven't underwent background checks permitted to be around our students? I don't really feel that's fair to the teachers either. And I have a lot of safety concerns around that.
Lori Lee, Principal Lee, would you please speak to that?
Certainly. Well, we use the park very often, and oftentimes during the day, we're the only ones that are at the park. Certainly, there's probably another side of the park at other times of the day or night when we're not present after hours. But like we used it today for pre-K screening, and it was just us that were in the park.
Is it usually with parents accompanying the children though? Because I know it's used for special events where they ask that a parent or family member accompanies the child there, but that's 9 kids to 1 teacher with traffic on every side seems a bit concerning.
Well, we have used it even when parents weren't accompanying children.
Okay, thank you.
And we've never really had a difficulty in accessing the park.
That's kind of a similar situation in Albion where they walk to the public library with a teacher and the students. It's a similar, they cross quite a main road and go to the library and go back to the school.
Okay. Other discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote. Booton?
Yes.
Boyden, yes. Davis Folsom?
Yes.
Dumont?
Yes.
Hashi?
Yes.
Hussey?
No.
Kinley?
Yes.
Kugelmeyer?
Yes, with reservations.
Lambert?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Williams?
No.
Okay, the motion to accept the school reopening plan, understanding there will be reassessments of that plan, passes 9-0-2. Wait, I did not, no, it's 9-2-0. 9 yeses, 2 noes, 0 abstentions. Okay, is there any other business before the board this evening?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we adjourn. Oh, am I? Can you guys hear me? No. So I'll make. Can you guys hear me?
This is Heather. I make a motion to adjourn.
Second that.
It's been moved by Heather and seconded by Roy to adjourn. Booton?
Yes.
Boyden, yes. Davis Folsom?
Yes.
Dumont?
Yes.
Hashi?
Yes.
Hussey?
Yes.
Kinley?
Yes.
Kugelmeyer?
Yeah.
Lambert?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. 11-0-0. So we'll adjourn at 9:49. Thank you, everyone. And again, we very much appreciate all of the work on the plan. Thank you.